Tensions exploded in the streets. This is no longer a brief news clip from somewhere far away. It's the raw, brutal reality unfolding before our eyes. The clear, desperate cry of a young student yearning for freedom is swallowed by the heavy thud of batons striking riot shields. The silence that follows only fills the air with more dread. Not far from the chaos, a trembling hand grips a worn, homemade sign reading, "Stop killing our children." A retired woman stares silently at a line of police, their faces blank, movements mechanical, robots forged in cold stone patience. Around her, the crowd scatters in confusion, banners drop like dead leaves, declaring, "Putin is a murderer." From the crowd, a mother's anguished sob pierces the night, her son has just been taken away. This heart-wrenching scene asks a question ignored for far too long behind the fortified walls of power: whose war is this, really? And how much longer will ordinary Russians be forced to pay this unbearable price? Step behind this iron curtain of propaganda, and a far bleaker picture comes into focus. The long-standing tale told in the West, that Russians quietly bear every hardship without complaint, shatters against stark reality. Empty shelves in supermarkets, endless lines stretching for miles at fuel stations, and streets simmering with rage, they all tell a different story. For years, Western observers clung to the myth of Russian invincibility and limitless patience. The narrative was simple: Russians would silently endure whatever suffering the state demanded. From this false premise came the assumption that sabotaging Russia's economy or infrastructure would be futile. Public discontent was supposedly too muted, too tamed, to translate into real pressure on Kremlin policy. Yet, this myth is not only wrong, it flies in the face of Russia's bloody, chaotic past. Russian history is not a story of quiet submission. It is a saga of explosive collapses and desperate resets, moments when oppression and economic ruin pushed people beyond their breaking points. The fall of the Tsarist regime did not arrive thanks to foreign invaders. It was driven by the people's revolt against hunger and injustice that had become unbearable. The Soviet Union did not collapse overnight either. It was doomed as empty shelves multiplied, the economy crumbled, and faith in the system dissolved. These moments were never sudden. They crept up slowly, fed by the widening chasm between the resplendent tales spun by the state and the barren pots rattling in kitchens across the land. Russian leaders know this truth better than anyone. The Kremlin's overwhelming propaganda machine and iron grip on dissent is not a sign of strength, it's born from a deep, abiding fear. If the people were truly unshakable, there would be no need to stamp out speech, imprison critics for years, or brand dissent as treason. The regime's desperate control aims to fragment society, isolate individuals, and crush the terrifying power that arises when minds and hearts unite. But even the most sophisticated censorship can't hide certain realities. Ukraine's strategy over the past year, targeting critical energy infrastructure, oil refineries, fuel depots, and railways, is designed to destroy the fragile propaganda web. Its goal is to turn the abstract numbers on Kremlin spreadsheets into harsh, undeniable realities felt in every Russian household. A refinery fire may appear on the evening news as some distant incident. But when you arrive at the gas station only to find empty pumps and wait 8 hours in line, the headline becomes your burden. When your daily ration is cut to just 2 liters, the crisis is no longer a story, it is your life. A drone attack shutting down an airport may seem like another press release until your flight to visit family is indefinitely delayed. A bombed power plant is a statistic until the chill of winter seeps into your darkened living room. One by one, these blows break through the Kremlin's facade. The repeated message, "Sanctions don't hurt us, Europe freezes without our energy," crumbles beneath the weight of growing impatience. Then comes anger, then the burning question: who holds the true responsibility? Despite this mounting turmoil, the official narrative insists that the economy grows, wages rise, and the nation withstands the West's blows. Yet, the figures that count are felt in empty wallets and shrinking pantries. Even top executives can no longer hide the truth. Germany Graf, CEO of the state's largest bank, admits openly that the economy is in technical recession. Interest rates hovering around 14% are far from enough to spark recovery, inflation, nominally 8 or 9%, barely scratches the surface. The real cost? A 40 to 50% hike in basic food prices. Eating chicken or buying bread is becoming a luxury in many places. Families surviving on about $400 a month are forced to spend nearly half their income on food alone. The rest vanishes quickly: heating, rent, medicine. A small rise in fuel prices or an unexpected hospital visit can shatter the fragile balance. Drastic choices loom: turn up the heat or eat tonight? In sprawling cities, incomes may cushion the blow for a time, but signs creep in everywhere. Imported goods disappear or become outrageously expensive. Western brands vanish, replaced by costly, poor-quality local alternatives. Medical supplies, especially for critical illnesses like cancer, dwindle. Airports shut repeatedly. Services degrade. The middle class witnesses its own illusions of stability erode. To mask this growing crisis, the state floods social programs with money and lavishes defense industry hubs with resources. Soldiers' wages boost pockets temporarily, but this artificial lifeline is unsustainable. It is like feeding a fever patient with sugar: eventually, the reserves run dry. Hyperinflation accelerates, collapse approaches with terrifying speed. Signs already emerge. Rumors of forthcoming cuts to the military budget spark unease. If the economy were truly thriving, why hint at belt-tightening now? Amid all this pressure, the Kremlin responds not with dialogue, but with more control and fear. Hundreds of thousands of young, educated Russians fled early in the conflict, revealing the regime's deepest dread: unified resistance. In reaction, borders slammed shut. Dissent became a crime. The mobilization campaign exposed the same paranoia. If genuine patriotism burned as claimed, why resort to harsh conscriptions and repression? The cracks widen. The facade trembles. The question lingers: how much longer can a nation forced into silence and despair bear this crushing burden? What if the walls of propaganda are cracking under the weight of everyday desperation? Previously we saw how past empires fell not because foreign armies stormed their capitals, but because their own people rose against hunger and injustice. The Soviet collapse followed empty shelves and shattered faith, a slow fire that finally ignited. The Kremlin's massive propaganda machine is not a show of strength, it is a confession of deep fear. If a nation were truly immune, there would be no bans on speech, no branding of critics as agents, no long-term imprisonments. Instead, the regime fragments the populace, isolates each neighbor, and stifles collective power as if a single spark could set the whole country ablaze. Yet some truths cannot be hidden. Ukraine's campaign over the past year has struck deep into Russia's energy veins, oil refineries, fuel depots, and rail lines. The aim is not a fantasy of instant overthrow, but to turn abstract war costs into personal pain for every citizen. A refinery fire remains a distant television image, until you stand in an 8-hour line, ration card in hand, limited to 2 liters of gasoline. At that moment, the blaze becomes your reality. An airport shuttered by drones is a press release, until your business trip vanishes, your family reunion postponed indefinitely. The shutdown then lives inside your daily routine. Inflation hovers at 8 to 9%, yet the price of basic foods has surged 40 to 50%. In poorer regions, a family survives on a monthly $400 income, spending half on food alone. After heating and rent, only $50 to $100 remain. A sudden rise in gasoline prices or an unexpected medical bill can collapse the whole budget, forcing choices between warmth and a meal. Bank CEOs now admit the economy has slipped into a technical recession. Base interest rates are projected at 14% by year-end, far above the 12% needed for recovery. Salaries rise in defense towns, but that surge resembles a sugar high, temporary and unsustainable. When the sugar runs out, hyperinflation will surge, and the state's reserves may evaporate. The regime responds to mounting pressure with tighter controls, harsher laws, and a growing fear of collective dissent. Will the next strike finally shatter the silence, or will the Kremlin tighten its grip even further? Earlier we saw how a fuel rationing decree turned a distant refinery blaze into a personal nightmare. The airport's drone-forced closure shifted from a headline to a cancelled reunion with loved ones. Those disruptions have become the new normal. What if the shiver of a frozen heater becomes the loudest accusation against a regime? The bombing of a power plant in the dead of winter started as a cold statistic, until home heaters stopped humming, and darkness settled over aching rooms. One after another, these blows rupture the state's glossy narrative that everything is fine. Sanctions don't bother us, the propaganda booms, Europe freezes without us. First comes impatience, then anger, and finally a burning question: who is truly responsible? While the Kremlin touts rising GDP, climbing salaries, an economy defying the West, the lived reality tells another story. Even the heads of the biggest state banks can no longer hide the truth. Sberbank's chief, German Gref, admits the economy has slipped into a technical recession. He points to the base interest rate as the chief culprit, estimating it will hover around 14% by year-end. Is that enough for recovery? He says no. Recovery, he adds, may only arrive when rates dip below 12%. Official inflation numbers linger around 8 to 9%, yet the price of a basic food basket has surged 40 to 50%. Chicken, eggs, bread, once staples, now feel like luxuries. In poorer regions, families survive on a monthly income of roughly $400. Almost half disappears on food alone. After heating and rent claim their share, only $50 to $100 remain to stretch until the next paycheck. Imagine the bitter sting of cold metal pipes, the acrid smell of burnt wood, the unsettling silence when lights flicker out. Each new hardship chips away at the facade of stability. When the lights finally go out, will the quiet streets ignite with collective defiance, or will fear keep the masses in the dark? Earlier we saw a family clutching a meager $400 income, half vanished into food, the rest swallowed by heating and rent. What happens when gasoline prices explode like a sudden thunderclap? The smell of stale diesel hangs in the cramped kitchen, the radiator rattles, the fridge hums weakly. A memory flashes: cold morning, the father gripping a rusted pump handle, his fingertips numb. They watch the meter climb, each tick a bite of hope. Will the next bill break their resolve? The gasoline surge has shattered the fragile balance. Can a household survive when a sudden medical bill appears like a silent alarm? In the dim hallway, antiseptic odors mix with the musty carpet, a child's cough echoing off cracked tiles. A mother clutches a crumpled prescription, the ink smudged by trembling hands. She weighs the choice: skip heating or miss a meal, while the city's market shelves stare back, emptied, labeled with exorbitant prices. Will the fevered desperation force them to an impossible decision? Now the state tries to douse the fire with glittering social payments and a flood of defense funding. Is the government weaving a false tapestry of prosperity while the nation shivers beneath? In a sterile office, the clatter of keyboards masks the distant wail of sirens, soldiers receive inflated salaries, a sugary lifeline that quickly dissolves. A senior banker whispers that inflation swallows 4050% of basic goods, while the Kremlin hints at cutting the military budget. Will the looming cuts ignite a final collapse that no sugar can sweeten? The Kremlin's real grip on power has never simply been through missiles or tanks. No, its strongest weapon was the deep indifference, the political apathy of millions. A silent agreement shaped 25 years of rule: stay out of the way, endure just enough, and life will remain manageable, or so everyone believed. But everything changed when Ukraine's attacks shattered this fragile promise. The core of that unspoken contract, the guarantee of a familiar, bearable life, was blown apart. Now, life feels alien and unbearable. That numb inertia is cracking, turning first into whispers, then into discontent, and finally into bold questions. Why? For whom? Who truly benefits? These questions no longer hide in private conversations or among the scattered posts on social media. They have begun to haunt the minds of those once loyal to uphold the system: regional officials, bureaucrats, even figures within the security services. When the risk of closeness to Moscow outweighs the rewards, the elites no longer blindly follow, fear shifts into self-preservation. But this isn't rebellion painted in broad strokes of defiance. It's subtle and corrosive. It shows in delayed decisions, lukewarm enforcement, and prioritizing local needs quietly, yet decisively, over the Kremlin's orders. Imagine a colossal machine, grinding under immense pressure, suddenly filled with grains of sand jamming its gears. At first, the machine slows, then it creaks under strain, and finally, it screeches to a halt. This teetering collapse is most visible in the governors. Regional rulers who once governed booming fiefdoms funded by Moscow's largesse. Today, these same governors face an impossible dilemma. Too much pressure means rebellion, too much leniency invites failure. The balance is disappearing. The streets ahead are heavy with tension. Will this silent revolt be the spark to ignite a larger crack in the regime? Or will the gears painfully turn one more time, grinding down voices turning into a whisper, then silence? The answer lies behind the walls they sought to control, and the people they underestimated. What happens when the very foundation of control crumbles, not with explosions but with quiet neglect? The future of a nation hangs in that silence. The cracks in Moscow's iron grip are widening. Governors, once untouchable rulers of their regions, face an impossible choice. On one side, the Kremlin demands unwavering support, crank up military factories, flood the front lines with conscripts, and keep the public spirit soaring. On the other, the economic news tightens, federal funds vanish, local economies collapse, and anger simmers dangerously close to the surface. Will a governor fully dedicate his last factory to producing tanks, sacrificing the jobs of hundreds of families reliant on civilian work? Or will he quietly let the factory keep running, preserving fragile livelihoods? Will he eagerly send more young men to war, or will he drag his feet, fearing public backlash? Increasingly, these leaders choose silent defiance, not out of rebellion, but out of survival. They grasp a haunting truth: loyalty to Moscow is fleeting, but outraged crowds in their own cities do not forget. So, while they tick boxes for central mandates on paper, behind the scenes they protect local balance, quietly resisting the Kremlin's demands. This subtle disobedience signals the unraveling of a once monolithic state. When each region acts for itself, the very idea of unity crumbles. A costly bureaucratic machinery grinds to a halt. Countless mid-level officials, customs officers, bank managers, railway chiefs, ask themselves, why risk everything to aid a system that offers no real protection? Why fast-track shipments that evade sanctions? Why approve dubious financial deals in the name of a faltering regime? Why prioritize military transport while civilians starve and wait? The gears of control are jammed by fear and doubt. The machine that was meant to run smoothly now stutters under the weight of its own contradictions. In the shadows of power, a silent fissure grows. How long before this fragile disobedience erupts into something uncontrollable? What happens when governors stop preserving order and start protecting themselves? And what of the Kremlin's reaction when those it once controlled turn from instruments to obstacles? The regime faces a crisis not just on battlefields, but within its own walls, where loyalty is a currency in short supply, and survival instincts outshine allegiance. The countdown to a new fracturing has begun. Imagine a customs officer risking everything just to speed up a shipment of banned technology. A bank manager approving suspicious transfers for the Kremlin's benefit. Or a railroad chief forcing a military convoy ahead of vital civilian food supplies. Why? Because the social contract has shattered. Loyalty has become a hollow word. Before we dive deeper, recall how this fracture is not limited to ordinary citizens, it grips every level of power. The once unshakable certainty around the leader's future is gone. Trust as a shield doesn't exist anymore. Now, each official, from the lowest clerk to the highest minister, is caught in a silent risk battle. Many choose one path: do nothing. No initiatives, no accountability, just slow things down and shift blame elsewhere. Thousands of these small acts add up, paralyzing the entire machinery of the state. A refinery left broken for weeks? Not just a spare parts issue. It's thousands of bureaucrats refusing to take a single risk. Even in the Kremlin's most secure halls, fear festers. Elite purges, strange deaths, whispered accusations of betrayal, loyalty has lost all value. Everyone suspects their neighbor is ready to report on them. This paranoia destroys rational thinking. Decisions no longer serve the nation, they're fuel for internal power games. No one dares plan ahead, survival means getting through the next day. This is no government. It's a mafia family crumbling from within. Meanwhile, ordinary lives grow harder every hour. The war's artificial economic boost, defense spending, is fading. Price controls lift, state aid disappears. And the true value of the currency bites hard. Suddenly, people see the grim truth, they are poorer than before. Shops may buzz with life, but they hold nothing affordable. Paper salaries climb, but purchasing power falls sharply. Does this mean the Kremlin faces an immediate storm? Not quite. The anger simmers, restless and dangerous beneath the surface. Yet, this slow collapse is far deadlier than any sudden uprising. What happens when fear rules every decision inside the halls of power, and desperation fills the streets outside? The story is just beginning. In the previous segment, we explored how the facade of prosperity in Russia is collapsing. Despite rising salaries on paper, the true erosion of purchasing power is leaving people feeling impoverished. While they may not storm the Kremlin imminently, dissatisfaction is brewing beneath the surface. Now, the social contract that binds citizens to their government has frayed beyond repair. Trust in the state is diminishing, and this disillusionment is manifesting in subtle yet significant acts of defiance. Individuals are seeking out black market sources for fuel, circumventing shortages from the official channels. They flood local authorities with grievances, seeking justice for unpaid wages and demanding accountability. Frustration spills into the digital realm, where anonymous voices criticize state policies on social media. The police presence, once a deterrent, now elicits defiance as citizens resist arbitrary and harsh penalties. These isolated actions may not topple the regime single-handedly. Yet, collectively, they add to the increasing strain on governance. The state, recognizing its dwindling grip, resorts to an iron fist, relying on fear and surveillance to maintain control. This approach takes a toll. Maintaining a society through force, rather than consent, is draining both emotionally and financially. As frustration mounts, one must ponder, how long can this precarious balance be sustained before something snaps? With each passing moment, the tension builds, hinting that a larger storm may be brewing just out of sight. To recap, the Kremlin's warnings about slashing the military budget reveal cracks in the facade of strength. Economic troubles tighten their grip, forcing Moscow's response to shrink to one desperate tactic: more control, more repression, more fear. But what happens when fear becomes the ruler's only weapon? Hundreds of thousands of young, educated Russians fled the country once the war began. That flight speaks volumes. It exposed the regime's deepest terror, unified defiance. The Kremlin scrambled to seal borders, branding dissent as treason, desperate to stem the tide of those escaping a future they no longer trusted. During the forced mobilization, the same fear shaped brutal tactics. If true patriotism stirred the masses, the government wouldn't have to dangle inflated paychecks or use coercion to fill the ranks. The risk of mass unrest in major cities runs too high, so the brunt of conscription falls on rural, poorer regions. This isn't confidence, it's cold, calculated risk management born from anxiety. Look closer at the grim tales of oligarchs, generals, and high-ranking officials dying mysteriously. This ruthless culling is no sign of security. It's a shadow war of betrayal hidden beneath the surface, where paranoia rules the day. Fear does not hone sharp decisions, it breeds mistakes, fractures, and suspicion among even the most powerful. This isn't a crystal ball predicting an immediate uprising storming the Kremlin's gates. Instead, it reveals a cruel truth: repression can delay revolt but cannot erase the inevitable cycle of denial, grievance, fury, and finally, uncontrollable rage. Moscow's grip may suppress voices today, but undercurrents grow louder. Change in Russia is unlikely to burst forth as a sudden revolution. It will creep quietly, gathering strength as local officials start to disregard orders from above. The looming collapse might come softly, but no less surely, like a house settling into its final cracks before falling apart. What happens when the very chains that keep a regime intact begin to unravel in silence? How long can a system survive when fear fuels its every move but trust rots away? The answer lies not in the streets roiling with anger, but in the shadows where loyalty shifts and whispers turn to rebellion. Previously, we witnessed how the Kremlin's iron grip can stall turmoil, yet it cannot erase the creeping decay. The regime's control slows each step, but the chain of obedience frays. Now, imagine regional heads turning their eyes inward, caring first for hungry families, not for Moscow's edicts. Security chiefs whisper hidden pacts, clutching personal safety while the ship sinks deeper. When that unseen weave of compliance loosens, even the mightiest ruler stands alone. Empires have crumbled after long, quiet stability. Think of the Russian Empire, recall the Soviet Union. For years, citizens swore change impossible. It arrives on the very eve of certainty. What if the collapse does not erupt in a fiery street clash, but spreads like a silent toxin? Ukraine's strategy does not rely on miracles, it banks on a historical law, relentless pressure on daily life, on the war-driven economy, on a control system riddled with hidden seams. Each new limit exposed thins the public's faith, slows cooperation, and drains the ruler's illusion of boundless power. Picture poison seeping through veins, first the fingertips, then the main arteries, finally the beating heart. That is Russia today, a slow, unstoppable disintegration seeping into the deepest strata of state and society. It is not merely angry crowds, it is the fracture of invisible bonds, loyalty, fear, and above all, indifference. The Kremlin's true weapon has never been missiles or tanks, it is the vast apathy of millions. Keep life familiar, tolerable, and untouched, and the people will not rise. But what happens when the everyday comforts vanish? When pepper spray fumes mingle with the cold bite of winter, when empty shelves echo louder than any anthem? Will the regime finally feel the drag of its own collapsing arteries? Or will the silent poison find a new path, leaving the ruler alone in a hollowed-out empire? The answer lies in the shadows where whispers turn to rebellion.